for having me here to the Brisbane Institute. So I'd like to start by taking you on a bit of a journey through the northern tropical savannas landscapes of Australia. So I want you to picture yourselves travelling across from Cairns over the Mitchell River catchment towards Kawanyama, which is on the southern edge of Cape York on the western side. So as we cross over the mountains behind Cairns, we start to fly across the Mareeba-Dimbula irrigation area. And so I'm going to point out to you the ways in which the tropical river systems of the Mitchell catchment play many different roles in enhancing our lifestyles, our economic activity and human well-being. So as you pass over the Mareeba-Dimbula irrigated area, you look down and you see all the crops. You see the mangoes, the avocados, the lychees, citrus, banana, sugar, grass and legumes. And you also see the towns that are dotted through the landscape. And so you know then that there's water down there. Perhaps it's in surface water running in river channels, and perhaps it's also in groundwater. And people are using this water to produce crops and to water themselves. And as we move further over to the west, the fields of crops give way to pastoral properties. And so the pastures and the cattle of which are watered by the Mitchell River system. So now we know that the waters also provide very fertile pastures for the industry up in that part of the world, and they also provide water for the cattle. And also we look down and we see a number of mines, both new and old, that are dotted throughout the landscape. And they also rely on the water for their operations and also to transport and store or dissolve some of their byproducts. So this is another service that the river system provides. And as we come towards the eastern side of the Cape, we see the river system as it starts snaking towards the coast. And so throughout this landscape are sites that are very special or sacred to the traditional owners of this country. So there are many waterholes throughout that landscape that are very important to people, especially towards the end of the dry season when the rains have stopped and the water is starting to dry up. So these are places where people get together for spiritual ceremonies, for social interactions, business transactions, and hunting and gathering all sorts of food that serves the basis of their nutrition and their diet. And they have been doing so for years. And also, of course, you've probably heard of some of the legendary recreational and camping opportunities that can happen in these parts of the world. Maybe some of you have been barra fishing in the past. So we've got visitors and locals alike coming from all around Australia, all around the world to experience some of the amazing opportunities and experiences that can happen in this part. And we also know ourselves that spending time in nature is quite an important process, to get away from the madding crowd. And so we know then also that tropical river systems, as with many other natural systems, can provide this sort of service to us. As you start flying towards Kawanyama, which is an Aboriginal community on the western side of the Cape, parts of the river system start to look like an abstract artwork. And so you're reminded of how often you've had some aesthetic pleasure from spending time in nature. And so this is another service that natural ecosystems can provide. And then finally you see the main channel of the Mitchell River. Around about 12,000 gigalitres pumps through this system per year. It spills out over the banks and creates some of the dramatic scenes that we would have seen in that part of the world recently. And so the wetlands that the influx of water creates provides very important habitat for thousands upon thousands of water birds. And the outflows from this river system into the Gulf of Carpentaria are part of the natural processes that provide such fabulous habitat for some fisheries, various commercial fisheries there that are worth millions of dollars per year. And so now I'd like to picture yourself down at ground level on one of these tropical rivers, canoeing along as I did with my family not so long ago. This one is the Katherine River in the Northern Territory. So the fringing vegetation here, such as eucalypts and paperbarks and rushes and sedges, provides habitat, provides shade, which is very important when it's 32 degrees, and it holds the banks in place, so it's reducing erosion. It also filters materials that are washed from the catchment, and it slows down water flow. Aquatic plants provide food for native fish, water birds and frogs, as well as a breeding habitat and shelter from predators in the harsh sun. And also in places like Kakadu, where this is from, the water systems of the north are a real basis for much of the tourism industry up there. Of course, there are many more aspects to it, but the water systems are pretty critical. And so the water is also home to a range of species, some vulnerable, rare or endangered, and some of them are endemic to these river systems. And these species are also part of what draws the tourism dollar, and they also underpin the recreational fishing industry, and as I said earlier, they're a primary source of nutrition for mainly for Indigenous people, but also for non-Indigenous people as well. You've got areas of fast flow over rocks or logs. These are riffles, and they provide habitat for many other species and a further basis for tourism and recreation. So this is yours truly looking remarkably excited about what seemed like a very big drop at the time. But as we look back now, it's actually quite small. But it was such a thrill. And thanks for the photos, Father. And then, of course, we've got these slower flowing areas, waterholes and pools. I explained the importance of waterholes, especially at the end of the dry season. Again, very important habitat for many species, and also big drawing card for the tourism industry. And so that's, again, me doing some research. My computer's just off to the side there, so I was working very hard. So all of the examples I've just given are of what we call ecosystem goods and services. So basically, ecosystems are our natural assets. They're our natural wealth, and they're made up of various types of plants, animals, air, water and soil, and they can be modified or unmodified. And of course, there are many different types of ecosystems. So you've got tropical river ecosystems, you've got the Great Barrier Reef ecosystems, polar ecosystems, many different types across the world, modified, unmodified. And ecosystems provide a range of goods and services, as I've been explaining, and these are collectively referred to as ecosystem services. And so the basic definition, there are a couple out there, but ecosystem services are the things that ecosystems provide that benefit people. So we're talking about a habitable climate, we're talking about clean air and water, fertile soil, crop pollination, educational benefit, relaxation and well-being, inspiration for art and culture, and a sense of identity. So it covers a full range of things that underpin both economic and productive activity, and also all range of human well-being. And so in the tropical rivers region of Australia, the tropical river systems do underpin a lot of economic and other activities in a very tangible way. So there are approximately 250,000 people living in this part of the world. Tropical rivers provide the drinking water, a place for recreation, support the horticulture and agriculture industries, tourism industries. There are also 77 different Indigenous language groups associated with the area. They have very specific and unique connections with this country. The more I learn about Indigenous connections with country, it's like peeling back the layers of the onion, and I've only scratched the surface so far. But for example, fishing participation rates among Indigenous people in this part of the world are between 89 and 93%. So it's a very significant part of their daily lives. The northern prawn fishery is worth, for example, $74 million per year. And there's also a very high conservation value in this part of the world. John Wojnarski et al. Have recently written a book on the nature of Northern Australia and suggest that Northern Australia stands out as one of the few very large natural areas remaining on Earth. So there are very high conservation values as well as the production values.